with the opening prayers. The yellow prayer book on page 3. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past give rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path.
Shakje jarbu jadungu janzar durjen janjen delo naro dang mabamala juje gambo ba pamoda ba javando kaju lama nanje da jonje danandana zura damje do lama labala jiso zang la zoyonde jamzang alaba dindri donjen rebe gele zor jinya soda sujun jidina tuson sheba meya sengegang dage malu de da damje ludanga ye dangwe cha je wo daga lo jison robar senje labdu sor je lamdan robar senje labdu sor Lam Drova Zegra Zinja Labdo So Drova Yizan Jawar Zinja Labdo So Kange Dinjan Devar Jong Gaba Me Ba Che Me Ba Che Ba Me Ba Ta Me O Me Bandro Me Ba Tade Do Me Donje Me Drupanya Je Je Den Ba Zoba Sanje Mananje Tamba De La Zanzar Tenjin Zava Lama Jeje Kuzon Do Je Selan Da 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 Ge Julan Pede Da Ge Temba Dan Sim Jen Je Don Ja Jen Bon Rebar Sin Je La De So Nangka Tang Nyambe Sim Jin Tam Je Je Don Do Din De La Na Mi Ba Yang Tau Parar Zoba Sanje Je Gombang Rombo Je Tobar Sa Di je de dambe ju gang yi sin de do nyam su la wang jo nyam be samba chang ju ju de sem ji ba dang ju nim be kun ju da kulong manor bo go ne sim bar sa de la gang sim bar sa we ju ne pa pa zang bo ju bo mo lam se da mo lam tham je ge jar bo de ni de nde wa do ni lam sang shi ba de hyo ga re
Cultivating motivation, thinking may all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain a state of perfect and complete enlightenment. Think that for this purpose I'm going to listen to the Dharma and then thereafter engage in practice. So this motivation of bodhicitta. Sorry. This motivation of bodhicitta is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the Dharma. So the Dhamma we are listening to is the prayer for excellent conduct, which is the king of all prayers. And the commentary is called The Excellent Path That Accomplishes the Twofold Purpose.
Jancho samba kunda zambo tang jambar yang la suba ke da song yong ba da zo jancho samba kunda zambo ke song yong ba de tene ta dala ndrewa che zam ndrewa la ndrewa hyogo dung karere serdu ta ngara zo ke nandung ha ko thoni chu nyam suling ba de namba sanje ba ke ta chu dang re de chu dang nang ke chu yang ta ba dang de cha de yore de yang ta ba yin da ma yin de gan za nga ta we chi ke ri se ta chi tu ya ma re de nga ta we che go te yang ta ba chu ri se ne nga rang ke nu ba le tu na ta chi tu ko yo ma re nga rang te nga nu ba yo ma re ba te churan chunde yang da ba rende yang da ba ma re se na nga rang ke ta chu tu ko yo ma re se te tani nge karachi ha kore serdu nge sanje chumden de yunglu song yab ka yo re tuso la lobjong jidu tani de la tani lehla re tang ne ha ko ya chi du zu ya ba tin chu se ne da jagam phapu yo ke tani pinde tala so ba tham che da bu kan ji jong ke pa da drup ji wo tham ju song la ti ne tani da yang da ba se wa da na rindo yang ma da ba se wa da na rindo se ne te lap to ko yo ba res
So this prayer for excellent conduct was mainly taught spoken by the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra and Manjushri and so forth, but mainly it was Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. And the reason why we are explaining this commentary is because the way we practice Buddhism, the Dharma, is on the basis of actually understanding the meaning of it. And so if we don't just practice the Dharma, but we also have to practice it in an authentic way. Of course, somebody like me, I'm not someone who can determine that for you, like telling you this is how it is in an authentic way and this is not how it is in an authentic way. So how do we know it then? We know it through the teachings of the Buddha, the words of the Buddha. And then there are those commentaries, the treatises, the various compositions that make these teachings of the Buddha easier to understand for us. So there are the various treatises composed by the Indian Panditas, the scholars, and also the various scholars and masters from Tibet. So based on their teachings, we can now determine this is how it is done in an authentic way, and if you do it like this, it is inauthentic.
so shigo yores tene namje nga so shin de ba to ba de wang bo rap ke tene tambe chu dang song ko barwa te la wang bo rap chak pa la kable jungse ja go yore nga so kable jungse ja ma thon ne tene nga so wang bo rap cha to ko yo mare ma do ke churang wang bo rap yin da se je ge zu yong ba da da churang wang bo tama yin da se ma zu yong ba da mare then the wambo rat chawala kablen timbe jago yore the kable ja mataba de o ta chu gnan do ha ko chi send ta lobjong ji go yor lobjong ji wala zunru ji go zunru ji ala teni lelo ke khapte ja yong du teni nga zo ke de la don li matam ne teni o ta lobjong che na shira pinga yo go mari sam ji so so ke thuk pho men teni de la rintang ya te thuk yo ma rintang ya te matam ti de la tu ba ke tene nga tso ke ngune che top go ya ra go ya te tene kalwe khabo yo te jikting ka sawala te ro jikting ka sawala kalwe ja ma to na tene darana jitera kalwe ja thungkhin tu so lo tum je cha do ta chu den jikti ka yin ja kalwe ja se ba zun ju go yo re te samala nam chu yo ba chik pa re ta zun ju chi go yo ba re
Also, Gachin Rinpoche has mentioned to us also recently that when we practice the Dharma, it's more important that we know how to practice the Dharma than to practice the Dharma at all. So we need to know how to practice Dharma, how to meditate, how to accomplish the Dharma. And it is then, when based on this knowledge, we develop faith. And if we develop faith based on knowledge, then the way we practice the Dharma is the practice of someone with a highest mental capacity. And so if we want to be someone of highest mental capacity, that also means that we have to make some effort. It won't just happen. We're not just born with this highest capacity necessarily. It's not like we are just like that, or somebody just tells us, you just are of highest capacity, or you are just of the lowest capacity. It's not like that. To become of highest capacity, we have to make some effort. We need to understand the meaning of the Dharma, and once we understand that, also have to make an effort with diligence, and have to apply diligence in order to counteract our laziness. Because otherwise we might just kind of become indolent and think that there's no need to learn all of this. And if we think in this way, we will not be able to really appreciate the value of the Dharma. So in order to gain, really practice the Dharma authentically and gain some results of our Dharma practice, we also have to make a real effort. And it's the same with anything that we do, also our mundane activities. If we just don't do anything, don't really work hard, we also won't have any results. Only those who are able to make an effort will also have results. So no matter what it is, whether it's the Dharma or a mundane activity, in any activity we need to practice diligence, because when it comes to just having intelligence, we all are more or less the same. We all have intelligence, but the differences also come about due to the diligent effort that we put into our activities.
당에 닝보라고 가르쳐요스는 잠주 몰라 책동 탐제 삼나당 학과지네 되니 노은도 다 소소라니 라양은네 게 생고도라 초와데 용거요레시 단데 백 돈이 휴베데 송킨데 산제 좀 딘데레 다 산제 좀 딘데게 베나 다 망부지 송요레데 뛰는 게다 렐라 휴지 휴바이나 dere kongke di chalama chudu chalama maransu orange wa den chudu pakpa rembe yinda kandawi hyogogori sitin suso ke te hakwa ji teni te ke la tingshi zone timba da hirami sungre ke toni papa hyo tsedi chalama korang ke nalo de la teni ko di ta kare zogolo di chimba ndawo katsen do dranga 하고아지 데니 데 락베 야 카낭라 간다 비교근도 수소게 제토라 데 하고아지 다 제거토르 야츠드 데니 소자네 소레레 윤다 자나 록 도아데 뇽드 다 도아칸나도 다 데라 소바 데니 마 다라 또아나나 마니 단다베 다 데니 가와가와르코 도아 뇽근도 단다 찹상 이제 하고아데 제바이나 다 살마지가 좋아요. 소바처럼 그냥 토고요리스. 단데 산제게 숭바레 산제게. 다 대인도 데니 나랑소가 잠부주 몰란데 데타 찍바 찍장 제바이나 데니 좋아요 토고요리스. 단다 마종바이나 땅 아초가 다다 바드 살마 가세스요레. 살마 도도 찌는 코로나나티 인지케라 피스 라르바 청중한다고 같이도 다다 맞 전용에서 즈만용 데니 가능한 좋아하는 용건도스 저런 제가라 좋아 총총 말 제시게 좋아 총총 말 저런라야 Date ba Tetsam Churang Kaha Koho Yorim Matoke, Troa Yons Zoba the Nyang Yomari, Tataba Salamusuba inaya. Munerana. Dina Ying Asoka Kase, Tachu gave a drava inaya. Nandon the He Serbanandana. Nika Ni Yorda. Hiraku Hitang, Jinshiki Hi Yore. Then Nika Sundrabi Yoritin. Oh, that day in some, the Raju Jungaina, the ni Semlan Jura Tang Tapoyore. Metsi Koran and Jura Tang Tokoyore. Metsi Koran and Jura Tang said the Carere Metsi Jura Tang Hibande, Susuga Samnoke Capsule del Jura Tang Yongoyore. Some capsule and Jura Tang Alatine, Conde Lapotojabs in Koran and you in the young in the Petroan Yang Tabande, not the Raj in the Yongo Yobarwa. Diligence tenen azulo jong duso ke nandong ha ko godo sebande dela todo yore mato yin da jumsin ke yomaris.
So the point that I'm trying to make here is that when we hear those words of the prayer for excellent conduct, then we have to also reflect on the meaning of those words and really gain like a feeling of it, like an experience, an actual experience. So to give one example that was given by the Buddha actually, and of course the Buddha gave many examples, but this might be the easiest to understand. And so he said that it is just like this experience of something, the flavor of something is just, of the Dharma here, is just like eating an orange. So first, when you're eating the orange, you have to peel off the skin. So here already you begin to be mindful. So you're mindful of how you're taking off the skin of the orange. So you're completely aware of that. And then once the skin is off, then you are mindful of how many sections there are of the orange, how many pieces there are inside. And then when you separate those orange slices, then you are mindful of how you're placing it into your mouth and then onto your tongue. And then once it's on your tongue, then you experience the flavor, how it really is, and then you swallow it, and you sustain awareness of how it reaches your stomach, and where exactly it goes, and all of that. So in this way, if you're able to be mindful of all of that, then you are able to experience the complete flavor of the orange. So this is the Buddha's example. And so similarly, we can experience the flavor of this prayer for excellent conduct, which is just like experiencing the flavor of an orange. Otherwise, if we don't apply mindfulness like that, for example, if you think about how many oranges in your life have you eaten, we can't even count how many oranges we have eaten. We've eaten so many. But then, how often have you really been fully aware of the flavor and all of these steps, the pieces of the orange, its slices, and how it tastes and how it reaches your belly and so on? Probably we have just really experienced a fraction of the orange's flavor, and we have never really experienced the full flavor of an orange. Up until now, we have never experienced it. And so if we practice the Dharma, it's similar. No matter how much Dharma you practice, it's important to really experience its flavor just like that. So you have a real experience of it. And for that, it is necessary to be mindful and also to possess this discriminating awareness or wisdom. So those two must be unified. And if you have that, if you are mindful and discriminating, if you have this discriminating wisdom, then you can really transform your mind and you can transform your life. And the way your life is transformed is through transforming your mind. Then if you're able to do that, it is said that samsara and nirvana are the back and the front of one hand. So then, while you are in samsara, you can then gain an actual experience or sort of taste the flavor of nirvana at the same time, because it's the back and front of one hand. So this is the only reason why it is important that we understand the inner meaning of what we are studying when we are learning the Dharma. There's really no other reason for that.
상제 히반데 제완데 제네 상제 고안로 제선은 만보 나나 ngarsu ko pakcha na or te yore da namba chu dung ko yin ya the nord yore da jancho sem ko top chiban de sem top yo go ning top hiba de ta jo ya ke te top de go yo bare ma so chama me inji ke la lembo sem ro parsi spa sem ro je parsi sem ro je da inji ke la mare lembo la mare che ta ma chula ha danda ke to ke te ke chun sa bo yong go yore ma do 산지에 콩게 자시 류땅기 세 산지에 장본도지 우토 탑세데 조제 야 산지에 그 추글람의 효성아 말이와 자부 장본도 마 탑주부 효르네 냠타도 지드니 게블람의 효용 바 말이와 콩 자부 그 람라 자부 그 세란 통고와 더 윤신 빼 침버린도 와대 산지에 그 자시 류땅 타바는 네 동다 청충아지 그래질로 땅도 말이 삼산도 루동 서비스 찬 상당도 대라 장초선 그 조시가 요르 대줌세네 되네 담보 산지 코알라 인종 히바데 루동 토마토라레도 요르바 디지네 다 산지 로토라 까와지네 다 까와지 히바데 산지 행동지 헬로 조에 대대바 말이다 산지 그 개비신이 망보띵레 히네 그 냠뇽도 차마 개비히니 탐지 띵크 냠뇽 중아래 네 다른 거랑 소디 촌보 노르장게 개비히니 간라만 보티인도 다 된다베네 테네 섭종제네 간타라 된다베네 테네 산제 상제인도 산제 거히네 테네 상제 바 말이다 가서 냥일인데 히바데 세이데 망보제게 냥일인데 송스디 지 매지 파 종수한도 어제 선은 당거도 책에서 빼 가르침 버릴 때 보에 그 책을 읽는 빼 과침 보여를 은혜잖아 같이마 선은 담아이나 냥이 히바 냥이 렌데 센드 가레리 동하렌데스 동하 가레렌데 그 지가 남철라서 본 코브 동하렌데 고요 산지 코로 자가니 파페디 나 자복 컴바넨다 파페디 콩그 담자 야야 바래 네 코브 동한들 타바지 마토바드 나마 용그 미스 산제 그메데 코랑 그다 나물 단다 계자 히어와 자강나 데니 상제 엔두 가레제레 로 때가 달로 쪽 두인 때라는 냠 곰냠니 다 라바롭 존나운데 상지에서 말아 데센드 가르스나 동하랜데 봐 어다 때라면 어쩌지 상제 희반데 다른 모르사는 당고요 말에 소소근 좀 봐이나
Often when we think about this concept of attaining enlightenment, we think of it as more as something that will happen after this life. And we have a very strong habit of thinking that way and approaching the Buddhist practice that way. But that's actually a mistake, because what we really need in order to attain enlightenment is we need like a strength of heart, literally, so like courage and a determined mind. But that's really the one thing that maybe is lacking, because we are more kind of in this limbo state, not really going anywhere, and that is the fault here. That's why we think that way. So when we think about the Buddha, on his path to enlightenment, the Buddha actually abandoned his royal life at the kingdom. It's not that the Buddha first was a beggar and like suffered from poverty, and then due to his suffering entered the path of the Dharma. It's not at all that way. It's the other way around. He was born as the prince of a powerful king, and then he abandoned that. And so that's actually an extremely important aspect of the Buddha's life, the fact that he was born as a prince in a kingdom, and that's how he entered the Dharma. It is really through forsaking, through renunciation, and not through hardships and then entering the Dharma. So the Buddha gave up a royal life, and if we think this way, we might even feel that if that's what the Buddha gave up, then why can I not give up the slightest thing? So it is this renunciation which really brought him to enlightenment, and so it really depends on this mind of renunciation, the willingness to give up. That is really what enlightenment depends on. And so that's what he did. And then, first of all, he endured many hardships, meditating for 6 years. But during that time, that's before his enlightenment, and during that time, it's not that he was just sitting under a tree straight meditating all this time, but actually during this time, he followed many spiritual teachers who taught him the various aspects of meditation, such as shamatha, calm abiding, and so on. And he followed one after the other of those teachers. It's just like the merchant Norsang. He also followed so many different teachers. And so then when the Buddha attained enlightenment, he didn't die and then attain enlightenment, but he attained enlightenment before he passed away. So often we confuse this too, because this term nirvana, sometimes people take this to mean, to passing into nirvana, people take this concept to mean that somebody passed away, basically left their body. So actually, it's important to understand that term too, because that's actually not what it really means. And actually, all of these terms, these Tibetan terms describing the Dharma, are extremely meaningful and important to understand. So this term nirvana, so in Tibetan it is Nyangyen Lede, or Nyangde in short. And what it literally means, so Nyangyen means suffering, sorrow. And Le, so from, and De means transcend. So transcending suffering, going beyond suffering. So that is what nirvana is. It is to go beyond suffering, to become free from suffering, the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, all the suffering of samsara. And then before the Buddha attained enlightenment, when he left the palace, he took a vow saying that I am not going to return to the king's palace until I have found liberation, freedom from samsara, freedom from suffering, going beyond suffering. Until then, I won't return. And so then he practiced for 6, 7 or so years, and eventually he finally attained enlightenment after having meditated and practiced the Dharma for a long time. And then he passed beyond suffering. He attained nirvana. He passed beyond all sorrow, but he didn't pass away. So it happened in his lifetime. And so for this reason, we shouldn't think that enlightenment or nirvana is something that's kind of far away from me, but it really depends on our kind of ability to strive.
Nge karse churang sala trawaji tribaina chuzuk sanjela rindor jinyo es sanjela hyakja tabala rindor jinyo es rindor ji mamnyong langkhe janjang injure den rindor gosa je yore sanjela ngune rindor ji gosa je yore kane rindor ji go yore o sanje jarbu ge series jarbu se indu ko jarbu chaya tinkirda jarbu chaya tinki jersey yonsu zo patela ngawang jor thya tinki bare de lutang thabarwa sanje chorang ke tikap so sanje marwa tandra ke jersey jarpo kan chatola de pa tinki ne darong chok de lutang chi thbayina nga ke shawa kayang ro he tunda dingune robta mro darong tinke khi yo mare yerne mata ba yim becha tang Teni te mayen pa ke chin ram mambo le tene ngarang ke tonda ten ta tonda kayang rwa che yorba soso la che metsin na te yongku yo da me te chom yin na ya darong te lu tong thu yo mare ta sanje chi te tanda chi tin ki de bele ka chi lu tong thu yo na ne kare che tang ma thare sitan rindar che go yo tini teni ta sanje ge sung dara ke te chu na wa che cha ge yo re ta sanje ge ze ba de ngarang sol so sem kalo jurzi tela chu la go yorwa teni ta perna ta nga nang po chu drog go yo ta mi ta san te som do yudi o sanji ke jersey lu ta ne nang po chu droba na ta nge nang chu drog go da mo go se te som ji do ya ke mo do si teni ta so so ke tong da chang chung a ji lu tong go ba na tong to po ba yo go yore sanji chu droba de yin dong chi derwa yin se de kare re da zambal na gala simji ta phacher kare zo ga ta simji la ne simji chang ne ba yin so sanje ko song ba dan de la pambo kare yo re sa dang do dang zi hen da hin dong cha ma simji re wa ta ju chang ga chang ne de ba yin sa re da ma re sa ko la do ndi chi bo kan sam na da chong 사기 re yin ji zero je tang ra zi tu sa re we hin dong ji le yo pe hin to ji bo je zhang ga zi zi tu sa re we de hin do da hu ba de so hin do do ta de zo da ro ra bo ge na ba cha de yo re ta de jun se na de ne san je ge de so sa ma de ne kong ge nyam li gom da de gom lam thong ge ngo to ni chin so ma re lam thong se ji de ga re ngu man thong wa shi ngu bo ji lakbar tun thong yo ba de lan lam thong se dara ligjar ji ke na vipassana la ndo vi se du kantar chepar to phapal go yo ra tin ti sek ji ma de thong shi ba ko ton da ra wa tin sanje ke ta de tham je je pa je nyam ni je lob jong je tin tan ra je na tin chi ne ta te ngarang la chur 동용 말에 다 서가래서 그 독재와 친부근하니 나랑솔라 야용 말에 림바 당도 속에 그 마고선이 야용 말에 다데 야용도 대초랑 장보지 임부 준생 그게 드나 진우사 말이사 세네 장보 임부 준생 어가 밤저미 밤저미 뒤줌생에 산제 그 람통도 속에 냠니 지투사 말이 세사요 말와 장보 the excuse 지사 망보 여러 가서 nga 직직 영어 맞아 직직 nga so 그네 냠네 메세 발라 excuse 망보 직히 요래때 수수수송 거걸 다 대한다고 지 리마도게 산지 그 취들라 수라이나 드롭다 산지 그 취문에 담보 희사도 수리 이게 저런 자 거서 로주도니 로솜 예인주 그 부그 잔냥다 송마르다 취 중거다 로주기니 로솜 예파르게 부janjang lokkurare churang puguji inaya chu drop choko yore sanji gu chu nyamni ji to ko yore ta churang gebo lona pe kumthona ta wok che ya la karcha kha ma to mingki ji inaya churang chu drop to choko yore sanji gi hiran nim bundo de the Gumi Sejin Kungarawa says another Gepo Jo Cheka Lamoji Sondo. Shiranim dot. Gepo she. Hearing to Dam Nisana Malhani, the Karma Kahijin Kohiro. Call it this only the Hiranium dot. Sonja, maybe no, I mean, so they are sober. Sanjay Chute, Churampu Chunjonji in a drop choke your race. Guys and Sanjay Chunker could do low 2 year, low some year park, Pujanjang Cordo Tampo. The solo cordo, Masone, Loginiam Yachi, the solo cordo, that Yondal and Corna December course, Yorova, de Yondala. Munete, Tarati. The Pug than a low chunjon, Jitanian the current. In a deep Pama to Soka Sanjin and the human Sanjay Pama get you my Euro Corans. Kansas Sanjay should be the Kedachimbo Gamariti, Hindong Hala, young man, because in Tonchong Jedo, Putanjet Stampo Sanjay and Don Zemo the Azanta, Maso Inchikil Mason, Tempas, Sisa, Coranzo did it, that's him was a general Yojamara. Then Sanjay Zala on Keja here, then Sanjay Garanji, Chuchukolo Corretisola. You like Mare Jijiri. Mate Logino Coyonda Chamajaro. Logisiva Tingunita young Poctabo Sabo Marine Logi Rubber Mambutan Yora Mambuk. Nereda.
So, if I would ask you, did you ever have a competition? Did you ever try to compete with the Buddha? Probably you all will negate that question, but actually you should try to compete with the Buddha in some way, because so think about the Buddha. The Buddha was the son of a king, and so it was already certain that he would become the king. It was already decided that he would take control over the kingdom in the future, and still he was able to give it all up. And at that time he was not a Buddha, he was not enlightened yet, and it was already decided that he will sit on that king's throne, and still he was able to give it up. So that's the thing to compete with, to compare ourselves with. Am I really able to do that or not? Actually, even if it is something going on in my life that's definitely less significant than becoming the king of a country, even that small issue, actually, that I'm striving after, that is what's really keeping me from practicing the Dharma, because I cannot give up that small thing that I'm going after in my life. And actually, it's not even sure that I will really get it the way I'm thinking about it now. Not even sure it's going to actually happen the way I'm imagining, because everything is impermanent and all kinds of things can always happen. So therefore, there are doubts. It's not so sure whether or not this is really going to become realized. But still, I can't give it up. And for the Buddha, on the other hand, things were already determined. It was certain. There was no doubt whether or not he will become the king. He was determined to become the king. I mean, it was decided for him. And he still was able to give it up. And on the other hand, I'm not able to give up even the smallest issue in this life. That's not even certain to be accomplished. So this is how we should think, because this contemplation, it's the mind really that transforms when we practice the Dharma. So then when I'm practicing if I'm practicing the Dharma, if you have some doubts about whether or not I should really practice the Dharma and it's really fruitful, then there's no need to have doubts when you think about the example that the Buddha had given. So the Buddha gave up something huge, the kingdom, in order to accomplish something that was not there before, so he still did it. And so now we have the Buddha's example, but we are still not really able to give up our smaller issues in our life, our goals and so on. And so when we think in this way, then maybe we begin to develop more confidence of being able to forsake certain things in our life in order to be able to practice the Dharma. And so the Dharma practice is done for the benefit of others. And so what is others actually? Actually, the Buddha spoke about there are incalculable numbers of sentient beings in the universe. For example, if you look anywhere, it's all filled with sentient beings, like even the earth and the rocks and the trees and so on, the plants. They're all pervaded by sentient beings. They're all beings, really. And so if you think about it, for example, you pick up some earth, can you count each grain or each particle of the earth? It seems impossible. Or the juniper berries and so on. There's just too many things to count, and it's all sentient beings really, and that's still the coarse level of what we can see. So that's what the Buddha had seen, all these others, and then his seeing became much more subtle because he practiced meditation and he developed this special insight into things. And this special insight is vipassana, which is like a superior seeing, to see that what one hasn't seen before, and now it is seen. So special insight, superior seeing, is in Sanskrit vipassana, and V of vipassana means this superior or exceptional seeing, and the rest of the word refers to the seeing. And so actually the Buddha gave us that. He left that behind for us. So he practiced it, he realized it, and then out of great compassion and love for us, he left for us an entire path of how to accomplish that. And so because of that, because the Buddha gave it really to us in such a nice way, there's really no excuse for anyone not to practice. So it's really for everyone. It's not just for certain individuals. So, for example, you can't really say that, oh, I'm too poor to practice the Dhamma, or I'm too this and I'm too that, and so on. There is no excuse. If we're trying to come up with excuses, we are really just fooling ourselves. The Buddha Dharma is something for anyone to practice, and it was meant for anyone. For example, in the normal historical accounts, when we read about when the Buddha first gave Dhamma teachings, normally we hear that the first teachings were given to the 5 fortunate disciples, but in reality, they were not the first ones. In reality, the first group of people that Buddha gave teachings were children from the age of between 3 and 14 years old. And then there was a time where the Buddha was not yet really known, he wasn't really famous, and so those children's parents didn't go to receive any teachings, and they didn't really respect him all that much at that time. And the children also didn't really go for teachings, but they were just kind of hanging out next to him and playing games, and then just started talking to him, and then he gave them teachings. So this is actually found in various accounts of the Buddha's life story. And so anyways, for example, those teachings were for children, and then there were teachings that the Buddha also gave to old people, even if it is just moments before they die, moments before their breath ceases. For example, the Heart Sutra was a teaching given to someone who was old and who was just moments before death. And so that's when the Buddha gave the Heart Sutra teachings of there is no eyes, no ears, and so on.
Yeah, that's the terrain Rabbi Joson Battery. The Nimbugun Mumbashi Battery. Lejo Tomna Yonsu Tazi, Numon Tomna Kundun Jombarsi, Dujo Tomna Tommi Rabzi, Zambujubo Tom Zober Jason. A le Shibandere, Ndela Nesana, Guamambo Nordo, Sam. De le Shiba Karma Shibare, Karma Shibadat Sundandu. Pokena lemde shiba tseni chayong ko bare le shibande chavechani la ko yore te nga chu tele jo la ko yore ta te endul kani ko anon ko yore shiba ina le shiba o leri setsa du te jiwa ngama jile chik je ya ba chanya sanon korna te tara tele zoju jaya me de jonda o tang ji hus tena ongdo net nondo se ju te ko nga chu ke some don't say the non-rogo yore. Tell it in June J. Yore, June J. the Kare Yongo Yorisina. Not so that Kare is the Penache Yatanan, Mapoche Lekachi Lena, Taron Penaporo, Tara Karma Chick Huna Leka Le Yabatean, lay in Batella, Donan Yonko Yomaringats. Karma Chick Mula. Nghe cái cha chỉ khi bắt tiếng lẽ sao cái yoro người vậy lẽ sự có Java cái channel là có yoro tel sam nó tăng cái yoro mà ta tel sam nó mà tăng tu chung cái tel zap zap chỉ cái yoro mà rồi zap zap mà chỉ tu ti chỉ cái này vậy tel papa chỉ yong cái yoro ta te inza ngã chu lẽ si ban de là ta 산재 그 취도 뭐네 한 사야래 sam nó 같이 따와이나 ta lẽ si ban de tăng chính khi sẽ đang 대화 첨부 휴린다 Tin hi sen du tin sem bukapso chek soso chek cheba rawda susu samno tangwa ji tin go yorwa this samno te mulan ron te ni jin tin go yorwa tins ta le siba de tere le thor tin hi tangwa na karma chek hula tarong te ring tha rawri ta ring bon rawr karma chek hula nga ke jawa gang seba ina ya te ding le se sha ta te endu tin dik ji ka tang en rewte nga khor go yor ngala min go yor ta tenrayendu ta chigdo ta hi gang ngai khyo te chiwa ngama te lemde si de tena sana tana ta chigdo nore la ko yomar da yang de yang yores ine yang nga chu lemde chawa la sana tondu duk tol ma yong go yor duk tala mtsin de tol ma yong mtsin din nang ke dawa din nang ke chawa la chorpa dawa din nang de shama din nang pa Shaman dinang chuchu nang karma nang karchala pan tini samno tangne debi indu tini rayin ke lejum de la zabzab che yong ko yore o te jum se den ta kandar ngarang so ke leje top siba da kare top siba da nuba se den te sa mandra wa yore nuba siba de top yimba gang hila tini ko ka mangin rawo je chare top siba de nuba de ngune ya mi yong ba kap cha yong ko yore wa 다 가레리스는 가서 오 신진단 대화의 디효 상고 요래데 버트로마제 수수감바 혈제야라 나미지게 요로 다 딜 바부게 당가랑 솔라 소제브 나미인데 용거 요래 델티네 체통로고 요래 가랑 주체 통용거 요래 체통화된 버트로마데 가랑 솔로 누라고 지는 인셈자는 가수 체통송화를 왜스나 말에 팀들게 줌들게 팀들 세테리다 Jabduman Rawana Jumde Timder Mishipe Sondo Munetane Jumde Timder Duke Tolaman Pamatana Hiakale Kapore. But Roma Jisepalangal Karachin Setondori, Samsano Yoroa. Then Natsuke Setang, but Roma take Setesola, Timder Ton and Jawayur. That day in Zantin Maransuke Zagosa Terry. Di namju tsek tsupo tu sola zab sen doba den dere. Tsek tsupo jik yina ya zab. Dan dusu rei de nga tsu chi loko me pa tang tenra nyingto me be chan lap ko yomana. Nyingto ngune yubu ke chan lam ko yorwa. Oh, dani zuba yubu ke chan. Da lap sina da tenra yungsa de yungkong de chan ko yorwa. De jum sena de nga rang tsu ke nyingto gosa la nyingto je. Ta ye be simjin de da tam je la ping ne kare chi ta ma to bare. Samsang tenra ka to na nyingto yo de ba. Ta ju tabu to la ta ju tawa sewa de jikti yanda ka tawa le jung de yo par tawa re. Nga tso dara jawa ka ju pa rawa cha yaba na cha ja jimbo dara tang ndo tang nga sondun jurbo ke tawa cha ja jimbo tawa de re. Ta tisu tawa de so to go yo na dani kare re sidu da nga tso ke nde ta chu shiba de sinta tawe chu sungdo nam ju de re da. Deyan zang ngarang su la ta ju ya la boba je yo go yorwa. Ta deyan zang nga tso ke che ta tambo dika le je tomna yon se tazi chin si ta suso ke mege wa kang sakpa ya na lu nga yi. Ta dina na mandu ba yo marwa. Ta dina ke le kare sa ya ba ya na le de korang to nuba tser min ka la mo yin na yang dine takpar si song. Tambo de teres.
The next we come to number 14 in the text, which is the aspiration. 13, 13, no? Sorry, it's 13. It's number 13, so it's on page 57 in the Blue Prayer Book, number 13. And it's the aspiration, aspiring, it's like literally aspiring toward the antidote. And so the verse says, may the forces of karma be utterly purified, the power of passions utterly subdued, the power of demons utterly destroyed, and the power of the deeds of Samantabhadra perfected. So the first one, may the forces of karma be utterly purified. So this term karma actually is one term that I think many people sometimes have a mistaken understanding about what it really means. So normally when we say karma, so in English we say karma, and so here the Tibetan term here is lay. And the way we understand karma usually is karma cause and effect. And cause and effect would not be just lay, but it would be lemde, lay and day, right? Lemde. And lay on its own is actually, so karma actually means action, which refers to the cause. So not cause and effect, but the cause. So karma is really actually the cause, the action that causes something. And that's how we sometimes maybe mix it up a little bit in our mind of what it means. Because, for example, we think that, oh, that's my karma from last life. And actually, we don't think about what we are doing right now. We just think it's something we did in the past and that's my karma. But karma is actually the action that you, because it's not just the result, it's the action actually. It is anything that we do in any moment. So for example, this morning I did something, or just a minute ago I said something. That was the action, that was the karma. But whatever I did before, earlier in the day, I'm not really thinking about it any longer right now. And the fault that comes from this misunderstanding is that we are not careful about our activities, our actions on a moment-to-moment basis. And if we're not mindful of that, then a result will ripen eventually. So if you really think about the teachings of the Buddha, they are really quite incredible, amazing. If we now the Buddha, for example, had said that actually for this reason, karma is connected to your mindfulness. And mindfulness, so is that so you're thinking something, so a thought arises and you're mindful of that thought. So first there is that thought, and then there is mindfulness of that thought, thinking about doing something and so on. And so that is what we need to be mindful of, because otherwise, if I'm just thinking and I'm not paying attention, then the result of that is going to ripen. Then I have already created karma. So with every thought, we are actually creating karma. And so 1 minute, for example, is still quite a long time. If we, for example, think about what I thought of or did a minute ago, it's still a very long time. But every moment, any second really, we are actually accumulating karma. And we are not mindful of it. So karma will therefore ripen into a result. So on the one hand, we say that, so it's not just, karma is not just, the karma from last life, but of course it also is that too. It is, karma happens on a moment-to-moment basis, but also, of course, it happens, it is things that we have done in previous lives. So in this life, for example, it happens. Now, as we break down time, it happens in any moment. So it happens in one's lifetime, it happens in one's month, in 1 month, in 1 day, in 1 hour, in 1 minute, in 1 second. So naturally, when you understand that, you will be more mindful, more careful when it comes to the accumulation of karma. And so then this term here, the forces of karma, so there are two very similar words in Tibetan, which are both sometimes translated as power or force, which is top and nubam, and they're actually not quite the same thing. So here it would be top, which is the force, and the other one, nubam, is more like the potential, and the other one is the power. So nuba would be more the foundation, and then top, which is the one here, is the actual power that comes from that potentiality. So in any case, when we think about may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, we say that, and at the same time, we are squishing ants and without caring much about it. And that is karma, that is an action of having killed, and a result from that will ripen. And so as a result of doing that, for example, one's own lifetime will become shorter. And so one may wonder how it happens how is it that my life gets shorter if I squish an ant? So that's kind of this potentiality that leads to a shorter lifespan. So it's not that the ant actually is doing something that makes your life be shorter than, but it's because of interdependence, interdependent origination. In the 7 verses of supplication to Tara, it says, those who have not understood the interdependence of cause and effect, and so on. So if we have not realized that, it's difficult to understand how my swishing of the ant will lead to my premature death in this life. But it's because the ant's life and my own life are connected. There's an interdependent link between that, myself and the ant, since I'm squishing it and killing it. So it's because of this interdependence, this interdependent connection that we have, that we need to be very careful. And that's also why we always say be careful when it comes to speaking harshly or kind of in an unkind way to others. The reason for saying that is not because, I'm not kind of holding myself back from saying something harsh to someone because I'm not brave enough or I don't have the courage to say it. it's not about that. Actually, the reason for saying it is that because of being courageous, for the sake of courage and for the sake of patience, we should refrain from speaking harshly to others. And so basically, when it comes to being courageous, we have to be courageous at the appropriate times. So it depends what it is that we are courageous about, basically. And so what it is that we should be courageous about is our wish to help limitless sentient beings. And the ability to do that comes from first understanding the view, which is the true nature of things. And there is first the authentic worldly view. And the authentic worldly view is to understand karma. And according to the Kagyu lineage, for example, the authentic view of the Dharma is Mahamudra, the view of Mahamudra, which is the union of the sutras and the tantras. And so in order to realize the view or how things really are, we have to come to like a decisive knowledge. And that decisive knowledge comes from within the mind. The mind has to gain complete certainty. And from that certainty, in order to have that certainty, we need to possess confidence. So may the forces of karma be utterly purified. So that refers to the actions here, the forces of karma, the negative actions specifically of body, speech, and mind. And so whatever action has been committed, so these forces of karma, may they become purified.
The yongs ta guna nimbo. Ta nimbo se de nimbo top ye titon he ta taparchi go bare. Ta nimbo top ye nang karchi hu je. So ke je yabake dikpa de so lan juba go yore. Juba je ne teni ta chinche ta te ta je miji ba ke domsam go yore. Ta ti domsam shiba de gola yang karchimbo je kwalin ya do samsam. Mimata nga ka te kala konondo kwa norwa ro langdere. Kare langdere chitang te yore na chu nga ran tonang ma zo. Chinche mizi be domsem sung yorwa. Chinche se ju de chi samno hira ma da domsem se domba sewa de chi ta nguma ni nga tata ba de kayang ma ji ba tikala samno tang de sare. De ta nguma ni Penta soso julu domba ji una o ta perna soso lo ni hyo ni tin domba hyu ne ta ta nga lo ka che na ti par de nga domba yo samsan ro ti kal san no tang ro de ta domba shi ba de tanda kal san no hyok chia tang ro wa de ma yin ba dom shi ba de san no ngune kar tang de ta yin ji ke la vaccine che la do ngung go ji ha vaccine la mar vaccine ha ne dom mungo jia domba se mungo jia te pe mesiba ke ta maung bal ne te me ji si dikpa te masa si ta tra we mungo ke ne ka thalam te ri do domba si de ma sa na tang do ya sa na ta ma de chi ya sa no tang de o tang ne ta par do kare che ya dikpa me ge wa teni so so ke train thop che tam ji sem la train当小巴西的我的巴的就不小巴西个山的话呢，落的要不里的人呢落多穷穷的，落多全部过呢，我的人我的念的了，的的巴刚啥样呢？上天他们这个的巴的我的人下个山，的山呢这啊，甚至应该绕啥样就是话，蛮不，的个的巴参嘛的，人全部个的巴参嘛下个人山呢，下头个有人是。Ya tukur wa de chi di ba chorang la de pink yore nyama kharan du da dik tu na du kan na chi pink yore zo da ngarang la pink yore wa ngarang ke sem de za ma cha ya la nu ba chim bo cha ge yore wa de de da Teni yin ke dikpa tamje, yin sam. Tedu sam no tanga do ndepa la. Sedu ndepa la yinda. Sam no tang sedu ndepa la yinze. Past what we did. Tikala sam no tang ne, teni ta chigi yinze. Sipo chase. Ten ndepa se maungpa la sam. Yes. Xiapa chira. Chikor.
Then it says, so utterly purified. So this term utterly here, basically completely, entirely purified. So all negativities, all karma is completely, utterly purified. And the way to purify our karma is through applying the antidotes. And it is said that the best antidote are the 4 powers, purifying negativities through the 4 powers. And of those 4, the most important one is, first of all, but there's 2, is first of all to feel remorse, regret for any misdeeds committed in the past. And the second one is to take a vow, like a commitment, committing oneself to not again repeat these actions in the future. And regarding this one, this part of the antidote, that's actually very important. And I myself, for example, also in the past maybe have had some misunderstanding about that. So we can easily misunderstand that part. So the vow, committing oneself not again to repeat these actions. So we think about, what we think about is the vow. I'm taking the vow. We're thinking about the vow. What we don't think about is not doing it again in the future. So we just more focus on just having a vow. And the vow is more something that maybe when I can look at the vows that I've had. For example, I took a vow when I was 20, and up until now, however old I am, I still have that vow. So I have that vow, I have this commitment. So we think we have this vow, but really we have to also think about later on, like having a commitment to not repeating negative actions, mistakes again in the future. So this commitment, looking at the future, not looking back at your vow that you that you took in the past, but looking into the future, taking the vow for the future, is like a vaccination, which kind of is something that prevents you. If you take a vow, it's something that prevents you. It's preventative, like a preventative medicine, like a vaccination that prevents you from committing negative actions again in the future. So it's not just something that we have done in the past, but we look at it both ways. So a vow is something that kind of binds us for the future, so that we won't commit any mistakes in the future. And so, in any case, here we bring to mind all of the misdeeds, the negative things that we have done, and we lay them down through confession. And so generally, if we say, I confess all of this, that is good, but it's also still not enough mental kind of like strength. We should also think that bring to mind all those similar activities, whatever the activity was that you confess, all of those similar activities that were committed by other sentient beings, and then also my own. You bring them all to mind and confess them. And so while we, of course, cannot purify all of the obscurations in other beings, it still benefits them because you become like a warm sun for them. But of course, mainly it benefits yourself because it purifies your own mind. So when we bring others to mind, basically, then our confession really becomes a great confession. And so first we are regretting by looking at the past and confessing on the basis of that, but then also we're taking a commitment for the future.
Teni tsikani pati nyumo to nakundun jombarsi ta nyumong se de karere. Nyumong se de sti ke lote nyumong se de loje rewa loje. Lote semna na ya ti balam dawo dun chorundu teni mayowa madorwa medewa tena chinkin tala nyumong se ke yore. Mayowa se de hyowa mayimba. Hyowa mayimba. Madorwa se de ta hyowa te hajang ma chazogalo devang or chuba hiwa chi yorwa devang or chuba lulu nang ke ta za lezin rawa mayimba lulu nang ke dewa tam jer deba ke dala drwa sere teni semju le chi madewa jindong ke rawa ta teni chowa yi de mongba tanda jindong ke tala nimong sa ke yorwa teni ti ke nimong de ko yang parent de teni top chimbo ne rawang mi ba chan ro ko yo ta nga control sagemi sena ya chekjig le tenal teni rawang mi ne teni ya control de ya chon ro yo teni da de ndu ta ti ta nyomong tan jin jombar si sena de to ne mumba ji ge yo ta ne nyomong de la je tang ke tsa nyomong ro nya nyomong ni shu sena dan re yin den je te ni dam chu gong ba ji ba hyu ka su hyu sim ba yin te so la sang dan ta ta chap sang hi ga na yang te sa to so man bo ji ngon ro ra krang ji bo la den de te ni ti top tham je kan tar man jom bar si ba la mum ban de cha do yo ba res.
And the next line says, the power of passions utterly subdued. This term passions here, so normally, nyumong is translated as afflictive emotions sometimes, and so the affliction is a state of mind. So there is a state of mind that is afflicted. And affliction is, and the mind is afflicted, you feel this wave of affliction rising in you, and then what we call being afflicted, an afflicted state of mind, is whatever it is that causes your mind to feel not at peace and to feel not at ease. So not like first we might be in a state of ease, not necessarily the lazy kind, but just being relaxed and at ease. And so then that is disrupted when we become afflicted. So we feel not peaceful, we do not feel at ease, and we feel unwell. It's an unpleasant feeling in our mind. So that's what we call affliction, an afflicted state of mind. And so when afflictions increase in our mind, then they become very powerful, and eventually they will control us. So even if you think that I will not get angry, then we still get angry because it just controls us. So this is a prayer, and so may the power of the passions or the power of the afflictions be utterly subdued. And so then there are many different kinds of afflictions. There are the 6 root afflictions, and then there are 20 secondary afflictions. I explained those in the teachings of the Gongchik. So now we won't go through each of them, not because of the time, but basically here we are praying to not become controlled or to be able to subdue all of these afflictive emotions.
Then do je tomna to mira ji jin so ta do tam ji top the me ba ji bar shiba del mong ba re zigang sun ba de ta po yin zigang sun ba rin de do then da de kare do kare do se do tambo kare do se je de kantar so la gorwa chinkin chewa chinkin ro chani la ko yore so hibanda da tarang ngarang zo namba sanje ba ke ta so raw ji na 다 다미 또 따와서 소로 차도 요래 다미 버도 따와서 다 다미 버도 따완들라 되는 코란 그 독소제 니 따라 가르생에 다미 버도 따와라서 다도 따와니 다도 따와 단징 따와데 베나 퐁퐁아 볼랑아 삼번진번진반데 되는 퐁퐁아 보 딤바마도 바랑긴도 마도 바라서 다미 또 히라로 띠네 종고요 바로와 Tene da live du sejude kantarde pig tone pason yabari madoke ton karere number yawa namyin den namyin dalan ta jinhi jiwi nim chun zong ne son tene ta dimba dan higin dimba tone ta nyamlin ango yobare tene dan chibdag du hibande ne kantar ngaran sola jiwa unin chewa yo servande jiwa sejode koran dambo che chu tamji yene drupa da trabarang yin yin zang koran la dambo jiwa me ba ba ha ko so ina denin chewa me ba hin ba ya ha ko to ba dana yong go yo ba re dene ta dana ha ko ndu dene jem che la rawang to ba hi ba de yong go yo ba re dene chibda go de sin je gar ro ai bu phung bu de chib lai bu de chibda go de nyomon bu se de gangla da hi gangla hyusin bandare dan doso la tin di du yet la tin ne du yet ge wanjor jin ro du de ngarang zo tarba da tamji la par to tamji ji bu gong to ba la par che ji ro yo ba chani de ne doso la du si ta ya bare de ne de pa mi ba ji to ba ina de ne da gar la ro to ge sin de ne zambo ju bu to na zo par je so mo la ta ba na yin ge tene randon ro yindon ro tela so ba ke tene lapchin ke tene jiuje chaya yo de pares.
And the next line says the power of demons utterly destroyed. So this a demon here, what is it? What is that we call a demon? So basically, literally, it means that it's something that harms life force in general. But so here in this context, the life force in the Buddhist context here is the realization of selflessness. That's the life force. And then the opposite of that realization is the view that sees a self, perceiving a self. So it's self-grasping. And that means we identify with the 5 aggregates as that's me. And actually that doesn't really inherently exist. This me does not really exist. And that is realized on the basis of wisdom. And so for the demons, there are four demons. So there is the demon of the godly sun, so which is just like one example, but what it really means is distraction. It means to be distracted by various things. And so it is said that 37 practices that one should wield the weapon of the antidotes with mindfulness at all times. So at all times one should be mindful and watchful for what arises. And then there is the demon of the Mara of the Lord of Death. And normally, so once we are born, we are also will die. But if we realize that all phenomena primordially are unelaborated, and therefore there is no birth to begin with, we realize that, then we also realize that there cannot be any death. And when one realizes that, one gains control over birth and death. So that is the demon of the Lord of Death, and then the demon of the afflictive emotions we just mentioned before. And so if we become controlled by these demons, by these maras are what hinder us in attaining the state of liberation, and especially omniscience. That is whatever hinders that, whatever obstructs our liberation is what we call a demon. And so if we are able to destroy these demons, then it says the deeds of Samantabhadra will be perfected, which means that the purpose of yourself and that of others will become accomplished, and you will become a very powerful being.
Dere gandar deke du yala sobanda chomson da dane hing dongbo chigla pe lang na song yore da jerdan namba ke sanje ke chu de dene jonga yibon da so ko tone ma pe le na song ko yore de namjo nga so ke tin hi tin na so ke dene lobjong mambo chi jang to ko yore. 그러나 행동적으로 따와야는 행동의 파트는 가서가 나호호로 행동으로 이제 전부진 통도를 행동서 그래 맞지 도도로지 문에 봤더니 짜른로도 다시 장ርን 보는 소소게 행동서 나호호지랑 찍데 드롭다 임바 트루아 임바 하고 더 그러봐 트루아 임바 하고 그래 되는 행동 그런 짜른로는 행동 찍가라 야가 때라 론답 때라 그런 나시스 다 예와 범차 망보 요르와 다 델타안지는 두르직드나 두르니 시티 돈사나 담아이나오 때 유축사리시 디그토라 고알림바나오다 야 다시 행동세 나호르직 로타데와데 다 동무토네 잘레버게디 나호르지랑지데 베드크롬 미바차네 된 로그바 답지제 그제 데이터 망보지 장야 요래 되는데 Chitang ke chanre tandaje tenin dala ta hindong la perjilana kanda song yor hubai na ta tambo chi te song yor ring bo chana sa oh ya marenga ring mare tenin hindong la den ta kanda bi yong gore se de dan de peno che lojin zogan ta jabo che ke dumra yoro dumra ta na hindong ji dog hindong ji ji yong bare de dog hindong ji ji ende tene na lumbo se de jabo ku lumbo yo ta lumbo ka je ke tene dog hindong de je la zhuan yang ne tene je la hindong ro ji de la cha ne de su ba re tene ka he su de ne koran zo so to bar che so re so trosnes ta toksune kon hianora ande ke kareting ke yurse ngarang so khoa po tamje teni nyomong ke perna nawen la cha nyomong bala cha teni tel den cha dang le so de tang khoa de ngarang so ke tarpa so za no je no yores.
So for the way in which we can destroy those four maras. So there's this example of a tree, a big tree, and in Buddhism in general, we often take like the elements and so on as an example that help us to be mindful of things. But anyway, so we have this tree, and when you look at the tree from a distance, then you have this whole kind of coarse image of the tree. And so then when you get closer to the tree, then you realize that the way you saw the tree before was not how it actually is, because when you get closer to the tree, you begin to see all its details, Like you see the trunk and the branches and the leaves and so on, and then there are actually hundreds and thousands of parts in one tree. And then you can understand, for example, what is meant by what we previously said. Within a single atom, there are like as many purulents as there are atoms and so on. So when we get closer, we see things in more detail. And in the end, however, even though there's this big tree there, we really think about it. It's basically what happens is when you get closer to the tree, so you had this kind of smooth image of the tree. You won't find that tree that you saw from a distance. It's a different tree when you get closer. So, anyways, there was this in relation to that tree. There is a story about a king. There was a king who had a garden, and in that garden, a poisonous tree was growing. And so one of the king's ministers, one time he tasted one of those, the fruit of that tree. And it tasted quite nice, so he ate a few. But because it was poisonous, then he died. And so basically, what we learn from that is that as samsaric sentient beings, we become distracted. We are attracted to things because the mind is afflicted, and then we indulge in those things with a distracted mind, and we accumulate a lot of karma with various thoughts of attachment and aversion, and this is what severs the life force of our attaining liberation.
Teni te la yang ka je ke ta hindong de o ta hindong de zawa ne ya ndo ne ti dora na do hindong ji ji do tra te zawa ne ndo ne ta hindong de pa ta ren bo ji de ji go do song ba re si na yang ka je ke te ne ang ka ye ke ti don teni yang ka je ke ka la ru si na 다 행동 그 자와니 알로 돈드니 때 다른 보지로 받지나 때깔레만 보자도 고험도스 teni 가래 고도스네 행동도 받도 자와들 초초로 야바이나 teni 때 행동도 양자야 지토고 말해 때 달람도 야가요리 라바리스 teni 양때 저요르세 때나 민바제 때 민바데게 다시 행동도 tanda tsawa che mi pa zo tanda gohom do te la min ke jorwa che ba na ti to to sar min le jorwa na tene min ja chen bo cha ge yore zen tene yang tablan chik tin ba res dog hin dong de min le char pabra min le jorwa tene yang ma pa che yore se te nga pa de ke ta te tanda ma bo le no gohom do se koran pa nga ta tanda ye ya na tene ko nga gze cha ne den ne ba chim bo je pin to ya ne ba je cha ge do la res ta ti ke pe de so ke gare song go res de na ma san je bang go cham ro ni zon de de ne ta ra da mi to pa ta wa par do la tham lam mang bo ji song yo re tham lam cha ma de ta ra nyu mong ba la so ba du ye do wa du ye to zi ke tham lam re ta du ye to zi ke tham lam de ram pe de ta ra pe ya ba na yi 담보 그 마히바왕게 뒤게텔 나랑서 팜네 되니 나랑서 고알은 참주고 요래 되도 뒤게 톱송아 되니 존데 나랑서 그때 하나고 제 거네 뒤게테게다 중대다 버지 지킨도 세네 되니 나랑서 그 뒤게 보들 카테자 당 럼발라 되니 다 럼바 럼지도 다 로그 너바데 야야 젠도렌 인도 되니 다 너바 첨부준 도야 요데 바리스 될땐 당 나랑서 제 유대 드선하는 뉴몬 람체를 송 그도다 대 담제 나 인게 따라 nga demne teni te nga ke ze yobze la longsu chun ro ba tena par ya la ko yore den de kantar sanno yabo tang da chin de ti nyumong ba la so pa ke nyumong du yete ngaran su la goya chi ris mogo wa chi ris na mogo wa chi ri la gu no pechu yore so yo mare se de pechu tang chog yore se pechu tang gole hina ya golok hi go res chu drupa mo so drupsar so sewanda donda chik barwa tra je so wa na tini ka chik chimbo mugusani tini ngarang so du yele jar to kondo se te song ko yore
So then coming back to that story with the poisonous tree, so after that minister died, then the people were discussing what to do with that tree. And so some people said that we have to get rid of the tree. Let's dig the tree out, uproot it, and bring it far away. And then some other people said that that's not necessary to do all that work to dig out the tree. You can just, instead of doing all that work, you can just pour some, let's say, molten iron into, or kind of a burning iron into that root, and then it won't grow anymore, it will just die. And so then a doctor said that's not necessary. Actually, we can transform the tree. We can, through medicine, we can transform the poisonous tree into a medicinal tree. And so then there was a tantra yogi, and he said, there's no need to do any of that. I just applies the power of mantra, like endow the tree with mantra, and then it becomes a sacred substance, a sacred mantra substance. And therefore, within the Buddhist practice, then it depends what we do with the poison, right? So it begins, normally in the Buddhist practice, begins with taking refuge. We begin by taking refuge, and then there are many different levels of practice until we realize selflessness. And these different practices that we do are all methods to subdue, to destroy those 4 demons. So it begins with us, first of all, not recognizing those demons and therefore always being controlled by them. And since they have always gained victory over us and we were always defeated, that is why we are still wandering in samsara. So now, however, we recognize the demons and we do not allow them any longer to take control over us. So we fight back at the demons, at the 4 demons. And as we keep opposing them when they arise, our mind, our practice improves more and more. And eventually, the mind becomes very powerful. So in the Tantras, for example, it is said that one should take the afflictions as the path, use them as the path for one's practice, and which is similar to this mantrika applying mantra to the dream. So now when mantra is practiced, then a toxic substance can also become something that can be still enjoyed. And so we have to think about it carefully. The 4 demons, generally speaking, are they something that we therefore want to invite, or are they something that we do not want? So generally, the answer is that they are something that we do not want. So we do not want to invite the 4 demons, but can we make use of them? And we can use them. We can utilize those demons. And so when we use them, however, we also have to be skilled in the way in which we use them. As I mentioned before, it's more important to know how to practice than to practice in general itself. So if we are able to use them in the right way, then it is not necessary to endure many hardships like with this tree. Then if we are skillful in the use of those demons, then we will actually defeat or overcome the 4 demons.
다 제당 그가랑수 추탐지 주마 다더니 랑이미 바토바테 타르토게 다디 트로버시 페트롤람라고 타르토고 트롤람데 대차도 요래 데더니 다데 소소랑 라레고 요래 소소게 냠링게 체게 가와 레비오 베르나 추랑게 초어직라 데네 디 초어 첨보직라 데네 디나는 로아이나 초어데게 초랑 컬머 마터바게 네체직 레비오나 데 초랑 초어난는 로네 초데 롱제는 이렇게 요바레스 초자야 라소바 데 초데 가야 라소바 가르치나야 데 초랑 디 초어난는 로네 데네 초랑 초그 짤 초나는 로야 그 짤데 마디나 데 초데 그 컬로 타마소 온토로 요로와 데 나인게 뉴몽바 시반다 쏠라양 소소게 롱수 주 무주데 소소게 냠링게 체겔라레도 요레 냠링게 체게 다 된다 침볼라 말람나 데니 빵우게 빵 파뉴모 빵우게 좀 바티토라 다 냠링지나 따라 강로 휴바나기 독동데 데니 제네 데니 다른 볼라 파 크리아가 타비 티토라 존달나네 야보요레스 데니 다 소소게 냠린 라소바드나 체기 톰볼라 렘네 데 뉴몬 바드스 트로스 저네 뉴몬 강지 용바이나야 두소 차마 트로스 저네 데니 소소게 게와데 얌 프레야게 체기라 렙도 요바이나 데 디갑스 뉴몬 데응네 뉴몬 차크요 마레 뉴몬 코랑 모브 토네 데니 랑힌지 마드바 지바레 데니 데인데 데니 저랑 추드발란 튼진라오 제 차게 요르데 다 데 따랑 알아서 그 제결 레벤도 뭐도 레라보 돈 하고 요래 책주 보지 라주바 곤토 안도 뭐도 데는 고 나와 잠라 주바 곤토 근도가 뭐도 데는 단다 제 산노지도 까차 깔렌 팀버 제 데니 가서 그제 잉그 돈라 도촌 팀버 제 땅 토근도 담도 란동다 치네 만디박 당네 인도이 상카 히 니스메 부톤네 추추제 메잉동라 동토근도 뭐도 단데가 동토메요 마레라코요 마레 동통케 요레 다드소게 야제 단지나 데네 레라부 톤다 다시 라 곤라야가 냠린도 솔라 타 녜보 차게 요레
So in general, it is said that all phenomena are illusory and lack any inherent existence. So that is the ultimate path of liberation, or the ultimate thing, the path that we need to enter is to realize that. And then wherever we are at on that path, you have to see for yourself. So you have to see where you're at in your own practice. For example, if you come to a big river and you're thinking about going inside to take a swim, so whether or not you should do that depends on whether or not you can swim. So if you are a good swimmer, if you are at that level of being able to swim in a big river, then you can go inside and swim or cross the river. But if you don't know how to swim and you go inside, then the river will take you and you will drown. So it's just like that with the afflictive emotions. Of course, on the one hand, we say that we should use them in our practice, not avoid them, but it also depends on where we are at in our practice, the level of practice. if one's level of practice is not really advanced, and then it's better to follow the path of abandoning the afflictive emotions still, which is just like digging out the poisonous tree and bringing it somewhere far away. But then on the other hand, if you're in a more advanced level of practice, then you can actually take the affliction as actually a support, something that you could utilize, something that you invite in order to transform. So you transform it into practice, no matter which affliction it is. And then as a result, your practice increases more and more. And so it depends where you're at in your practice. If you're at an advanced level of practice where you can utilize the afflictions, you are able to do that because you actually know that the afflictive emotions are not really afflictive emotions, because you have recognized what their true nature is, and that they lack true existence, and that they're all the same. So then, from that perspective, the afflictions actually become support to your Dharma practice. So whether or not you are at that level of practice, actually something that can be seen very easily. You can ask yourself a few questions such as, am I able to be patient when someone speaks to me harshly? Am I able to practice patience when I have a headache? Am I able to practice patience when there are some difficulties? Am I able to give up a little bit of my time and endure some difficulties for somebody else? Am I able to do that or not? Am I able to do that without any self-concern at all? Can I give 1 hour of my life really for the sake of others? So these are those questions. And of course, I'm not saying that that no one is able to do that. We certainly are, but at times, but we have to improve that and develop that through the methods that we mentioned previously. And so then in this way, just coming closer and closer to our aim in practice.
Dikhala nipa ya je mambo shuji tongju yo deba che. Chitang nga sola zupo la nipa che yorwa. Di gang la nipa mambo ya tongju yo ba te nga su samno tangji na mambo je ran chu jinda wa. Jin yinda la tena pe na nga so namka. Namka nangka da dawan tongko yore. Dawan tongya te nga rang su chitang da dawu un tongya ke mishi je yore. Da tela rokpa chinke jang her pi ju tangna chik te ba ina 하장게 되니 디난게 뭐 make 히바 통화래 장 천토하진 통토분도 봐 단데 지 등rap게 가좀 친르게 무감 그 저거다 소라 디네 누바 컴퍼트 소산로야 요르다 되니 가좀 하도 나니 다 하도 냐네 제네 되니 도당도 소라 하 자노네 되니 양만의 제든라라 하 자노네 Tene megla andam per na megla te gona. David tene make hiba da haja sipo chan tene da halam da ngarang chuk make da hiba de la dabjur ke tene jazo ko sipo cha tene ngupo mambo kojor ko ngupo mambo thong to ga da chaya yore sung ko yore. Da de darong chik sek to ne si tim re ko to ne la ga chi tang jere. Nang timda ka thone ngarang chola yi je number hiba zdoa kui je yi je number hiba nde tola yondar che ndi tola te wend thama ngarang chola make number make ngunhi se je tabre da make ngunhi nde sanje ke yondin je re de sanje le te sanje chadu make ngunhi thaba de re mdawa sanje me tarate Jimbanya yala so ba gomdo ba kapsuni tene remchi make ngumhi to son thongdo sanjela ngaran chola chikba reda te tab nyamlin ke 책이 된 로트바이나 대인도 다做的 이게 또는 나랑 그 샘도做리 샘做리 전도데 샘고 토는 네 존다르지 바이나 야제 첼 가반도야 요데바 드나리 베나 다라다 지레 제난라 지레 발라고나다 남르 종케 찔은 소나 코다 남르 조당데 다 보바케 남르 라가라르 네 짭자라리 짝자 다텐 짝샤제 남칼람 퍼트바지 쿠즈조고 요런 지레 바 대조도 코란소근 제마레레 데니 다 효바 가와가와 고요 참 코츠 텔사운도 존다베데 타마 짝샤제 남칼람 퍼트바 먹거는 로트고 이제 조탑으로 하고서 다 나초 남바케 다 딕토라 삼노데 파땅케 마땅바리 다 간다 남베 땅케 요마레 남베 다 삼노데 가라탄스나 셈 코랑가 토라 삼노타네 데니 다 뉴몬바당 데니 티카토라 다 다미토베 히랍 데라양 데니 누바 간다 간요 탈 간다 가란도 상 간다베 제케요 다 티토라 삼노타인데 데니 티크토는 탈신소아 데니 나랑주 용라 제나 데니 산지 좀 된데 자가도리 딜라 상제바 주주 mel아레바 데니 보간진 좀나 상제바 단테르 ngasolata 판다노지 무스 요바레와 다 로당도 다리 로당 다인데 데니 나랑주게 셈고톤 다라에나 톱톱톱 전도 몰라자나도 도소 탐제 제 몬데라고 제네 용야 미데와 제 용효 세는 남용 랍고요 말에 용야 유바 짱짱 고토는 데네 다라 제바 있나 데네 다 르브주 요바 자와 짱짱 르브주 요바데 제와 심마 제라 르브주 요데바 자 마이바 첸데 랑 고토라 데라 너바진 돈 톱주 요데바제 산제 코랑 그 데라 그 너바데 용수조 바 돈네 데네 다 가솔 처터 송용 바레 ngachola tin no ba den dok sungware sanje ke choran su soke jeba na tin no ba den dok sonne te ngarang chu churti yom ba indu ta ngarang chu ke chilen ro cha da yor semla jondar che ne gom ja se da gom sendu so chihu de de ngarang chu gom di chi ne sen ko tola de de zang ngarang so le nupa ji dara yu de ba nupa de la tunji man bo ji gore ngarang so mai de la ka si jang her yu nan da wa nang ke ngu bo tha wa te sin thong ya ke nupa yor de jang her mi na thong to ke mar wa di na yin ge dara dam bu chu na he ya bo ga tam lam de so mi na ni ngarang so sen le nupa yu de ba de top la ya jor to ko yo mar nupa de min to ko yo mar mi ma ta de de ngarang so 디 미제 통통 인자 데니 양 디그 루드 저자 놓고 요래 루 저자 잡사데 데니 야 다다나 인 튠진 좀 보제 용 세지데 레라보 요 말에 튠진 좀 보데 레라보 용 더가 말 용 마탑데 데니 가레 차 놓고 있다 트루와 그 히바데 혁체를 놓고 요래 다랑 안랑 준디 디 가레라고 에리 등로당 예다다 냐와도 솔은 트루브키 히바도 흉치아요를 nga랑 솔은 근데 nga랑 솔에 뜨나 트루브키 히바 흉치아요 nga랑 솔 때솔에 뜨는 트히도 흉아요래 배는 nga랑 솔 부고 충충 갑다 다다 갑서 만다완도와 다랑 nga랑 솔 트히 흉치를 지른 로고요래 대 가레레세드 다 지와 셔마셔와들 카타니런 로드 트루와도 흉치를 로고요래 대 박차로 오지 세 인치 위요래 가리 박차 세
nga pugu chung de dorna ra ta na pena nga lo chu kapla ra teri tanda lo shi chu kapla teni
저런 다한 들어 제로 제르웨
nga pugu da this 마시바 망보다
마히바 트로아스 데좀 준 트로아스 와데 부가스 저랑 다다게 저랑 유르 요베 공다다 때문에 비주 마다나다 다다 저랑 유르 요베 차당 대당 저 부가 충정 값수 요베 차당 지 쓰담 따라 다다 작은데 쓰는 바제 예치가래 다 예디 야보 정근에 냠리 연 다데 아
사마인게 말아 이내 nga 단다 파체 충드 값라 따나 야 라서
아
나이나
Ale te na ya pochiri ke in that kanza tendra yujira ngone le taba le taba chane injure matung ta ngan ro in ne tambo la gor te che pu ka su chadang ro hira mi hi ro pe na pu ka su ngarang na me chi maga sa ga dra ji una dra yin ba hi mar nge dra yin ba hi mar si nge dra jing ge yo mar ko so ngarang phama na maga sa ma ji una tenga tenga ka dra ni sang ga dra ri da sa ya ka sa no te hira yo mar chadang hira yo mar ya re te yo lai ta dra ya cheren yi de ngarang la maga sa ji una o tenga dra ri sam pa te sam no yo yo ba ji 소소 그 나무지 나무 그 분자도 소 뭐가 봐지 요나야 대양 아주 다리 대양 아주 다리 다 전에 트리히도 효치르처럼 로요 된다인자 가서 다 된다도 사람 마음 땅 가서 요레스 다들 간사 상진기는 다 제스말 타녀게 저 트리히 효초는 롱키 요르바 that tricky zone of Kina. That's a down terror. So, Jiwan Dekita, Sunamra of the Massering, you know, Taragange Kaki Sembra Mugos Central in Yorba, Central Mugusela Centragic. Maranzo go on the pata and tell us Sembra as a go Madas on Coso Sembra Yora. 다들 루땅은 저게 도와시. 저런 다다바도 메체는 모자 뉴야 강바 뉴야 자창제야 저런 곳에 제야시 다 저런네 로카히에 나온다는 제 심발루루지 게와 드데라 삼산다오지 가서 때는 도와래라 보러 코소 때문도 내가 좀 저거요 메부 가래래 되니 다 트리히스지도 효처럼 로아도 좀지 됐어 라토고 요라 다 저런 미사리도 말한 거는 저 나 지금 저런 김종인 줄 김종 파전 대 mambo 요라 대 말해 이제는 저런 부가서 독자요 나 난출 마텐 따라 텔도가 자시 봐라 봐 대이네요 다 레이트 사튼 요라오다 간자 난 담라 요라 저러나야 야자자래
So for example, we have a potential, and because like when the potential exists, then it can be developed into something, into a greater power. So for example, we have a certain kind of potential, like physical potential, things that we can do with our bodies. So we have the potential, but we cannot actually do them until we develop that potential into the power. And so based on that example, we can also, if we understand this example, we can apply it to the mind as well. Or for example, when you look into the sky, night sky, you can see the moon, the radiant moon, you can see it, but you could see it in much more detail if you had a telescope. If you look at the moon with a telescope, you can see much more details. So this is also something that is possible nowadays because of technological developments. So we are able to increase potential, but kind of develop the potential into a power also through science. And now from a tantric perspective, if we practice mantra, then we can apply the mantra to a rock, for example, or any other object, any other substance. And then when you, for example, you apply mantra on a rock and you have this mantra power, and then you put it on your eyes, like you rub your eyes with it, for example, then it is said that the eyes can become really clear again. So actually many times more clear. So the clarity is multiplied many times if it comes from mantra, a real mantra power. And then one can even see things like hidden things that one was not able to see before. So all of that is just outer interdependence. On the inner level, the inter-interdependence here is that when one trains the mind, one develops the seeing of the mind, the seeing capacity of the mind, which is developed when we train our mental consciousness, the fundamental mind, the consciousness. So if that is trained to perfection, in the end, one attains clairvoyant powers of sight, seeing clairvoyantly, which is one of the Buddha's qualities. But it's actually not a quality that the Buddha attained after attaining enlightenment. It already happened before, when he was practicing meditation of mindfulness meditation, that actually developed gradually in the ability of clairvoyant seeing with the eyes and also with the mind. And so because the Buddha had experienced that, he gave it to us, and this is something we too can experience if we practice. So in a Buddhist path, the mind is most important, so therefore it's most important to train the mind. And now, for example, when we think about in a scientific way what science was able to develop, for example, an airplane, in Tibet, by the way, we call an airplane an iron bird. So we think that's like an iron bird that can fly in the sky. But anyways, if you think about how it was produced, each nail that was used, and then how they thought about where to put the wings and all of that. So they assembled this airplane and put it all together. So in the end, it was able to take off and transport a lot of people. So that's something we can create. And so now within Buddhism, it's more that we are looking not outside but inside at the mind. And training the mind means that overcoming the afflictive emotions, we must realize selflessness. We must realize our wisdom. And with wisdom, we realize the potential that we have and how we can get there, how we can bring it to ripening. And so we reflect on that, and then we practice. And when one then reaches the furthest limits of the mind, one attains enlightenment. And the most famous person for having done that was the Buddha himself, who attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. And then also in Tibet, for instance, there was Milarepa who attained enlightenment. So we have a lot of evidence of individuals who have accomplished that. And so this is why we always say make a prayer, because not because it is kind of like a blind faith, you're just praying for something that might not happen, but the things that we're praying for here in a Buddhist context now are all things that can actually happen. So all things that can actually be accomplished, that are possible to accomplish, and not only in next life, but also in this life. And this is what the Buddha gave us. He developed his own potential, and since we have the same potential, he gave us the way to actualize that potential. And so whoever, no matter who, anyone has it. Anyone has the same potential. It's just we have to do things to train our mind. And what we do is we practice meditation. And meditation basically means habituation. And developing the potential that we do have. And in order to develop that, there are many different conditions that have to be met. So, for example, it's just like, even though there is the potential, it's possible to see the moon from far away with a telescope, but only if you have a telescope. If you don't have a telescope, you will not see the moon in its detail from far away. You won't see it really big. And so basically, even though we have the potential, generally speaking, if we do not have the path of practice of the Holy Dharma, then that potential cannot mature, cannot be developed into the actual power. And so our lifetime is quite short, and when it's over, we will exchange bodies again. And right like now, actually later on, once we have exchanged the body and taken on a different body, it will no longer be so easy to assemble all of these conditions necessary. The conditions will just not arise the way they are arising now. So then what happens? What happens is that our confused state of mind, like the delusion in our mind, the deluded mind increases. So when we take birth as an animal or a hungry ghost or a hell being, the delusion in the minds of those beings is much more profound, much deeper in comparison to us. So compared to them, our delusion is still quite small. So for example, when we are children, when you look back at how you were as a child and when you are young and how you are now, what happens mostly is that your confusion, your deluded mind increases more and more as you grow older. And that is because as you go closer to your future lives, then delusion just naturally becomes stronger. And so, for example, when I was young, for example, I had less thoughts of attachment and aversion. And for example, I wouldn't recognize who was an enemy. So if there was an enemy who was an enemy to my family, I wouldn't really grasp at that and think much about it. I wouldn't see that person as an enemy. And then later on, as life goes on, then we begin to cling much more and we think more like, oh, this is my enemy, and so on, of my family members, and these are my family members, and these are my friends, and this is an enemy. So it seems that as we get older, the confusion or the delusion in the mind becomes generally stronger. So I was saying that maybe it's the other way around for me. I was a pretty bad child, and now maybe I'm a little bit better than before. But so it doesn't necessarily. It's not the same for everybody, basically. So sometimes when we practice, things get better, and just generally speaking, that's how it gets. When an ordinary person now gets older, then often the merit of this life becomes exhausted. And when we look at old people, sometimes we think that, oh, they worry about things that actually there is no need to worry about those things, and they still worry about those things. And then we just tell them that's like pointless to worry about that, but they still do it. They just can't give it up. And we feel that, like, why are you so stressed? You lived your life and you accomplished everything. You have a car and a house and you got married and all of that. And you did everything you wanted to do. And still, like, you're worrying about everything. Wouldn't it be better to spend your last years just a bit more relaxed? But then they still worry, even though maybe we criticize that. But the thing is that when we get older and approach the next life, then generally our delusion increases, and then it increases more when we go into the next life. So anyways, but not everyone is the same. It's also like possible that one was like worse before and it's getting better now. But just generally speaking, that's how it goes.
Thank you very much.
We do dedication on page 11 in the yellow prayer book. By this merit, may I attain omniscience, having defeated the enemies of my wrongdoing. May I liberate all beings who are tossed in the ocean of samsara by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And then page 16. Just as the hero Manjushri realized things as they are, and as did Samantabhadra too, I will follow in their path and perfectly dedicate all these virtues. And then in the blue prayer book, page 64, verse number 21. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed.